Yeah. I'm just going to double check.
It's the waiting I can't stand.
We might be there now, Chair. I'm just going to double check. Yep, good to go, Chair, whenever you're ready.
Right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Kettering Borough Council's Executive Committee. Are there any apologies, please?
No apologies, Chair.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. The minutes of the meeting of the Executive Committee held on the 8th of July 2020. Do you approve those as an accurate record of what was said? Thank you very much. Thank you. I've got no matters of urgency. I've got nothing that's been referred by scrutiny or forums or from council. And I believe the draft work programme went out electronically earlier today. So we'll go straight on to item 9. This is Kettering Borough Council's budget update, September 2020, and I believe Mark Dickinson is going to talk to this report. Mark, over to you.
The purpose of the report is threefold. Firstly, is to provide an update to the budget monitoring figures that were presented to the previous Executive Committee, and to give an update on the government grant scheme for small businesses, businesses in the retail, hospitality and leisure sectors, and grants paid to businesses via the discretionary grant scheme. And finally, it provides an update on government funding for 21-22. In terms of the budget monitoring, there is still much uncertainty facing the local government sector as a whole, and this report seeks to identify the potential financial impact through considering a range of possible outcomes. From the figures in Table 1, it can be seen that the total range of budget pressures is shown to be between 1.5 million and 4 million. The government have to date provided 3 tranches of additional funding for local authorities to help them respond and to recover from the COVID-19 pressures. After taking account of government funding that has been received of just under £1.25 million, the potential COVID-19 pressures could range between 300,000 and 2.8 million. The government will also be providing financial support to compensate authorities where COVID has impacted on their ability to generate income as a result of the pandemic in the current financial year. Updates will be provided to future executive meetings regarding the amount claimed under this scheme. However, the actual full year figures will not be known until May next year. After taking account of the financial challenges resulted from COVID and the additional funding provided by government, the council's budget is better placed than most, and this is a result of the strategies used for many years, whereby savings are identified in full ahead of the financial year. There are a number of non-COVID-19 variations, and these are currently projected to result in a favourable variance of around £400,000. The main variations relate to lower borrowing costs and additional income. After taking account of these variations, the estimated outturn for the general fund could range from a small surplus of £100,000 to a deficit of around 2.4 million. There are a number of financial challenges that COVID could have on the new unitary from 21-22. The main additional pressures could include a reduced council tax yield and business rates yield. There could be the impact of the delay to the fair funding review and an impact of the business rates baseline reset. The government, in response to COVID-19, provided support for small businesses and businesses in the retail, hospitality and leisure sectors. The support was provided through 2 grant funding schemes, and local authorities were responsible for making payments to businesses. And the small business grant scheme was fully funded by the government, and this council has paid out over £16 million to over 1,350 businesses. In terms of the discretionary grant scheme, this scheme provided further support to those businesses who were not eligible for one of the previous grants. And the discretionary grant scheme was designed at a local level, and this was reported to and approved by the executive at the June meeting. Local authorities were again responsible for making payments to businesses, and the scheme was fully funded by the government. This council has paid out over £720,000 to 97 businesses. The recommendations are set out in section 13 of the report, and I'm happy to take any questions through you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Mark. Was Lloyd, did you want to say anything?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Most of my thunder with what he said, but the report is very comprehensive. A few things I would say is there's one thing that's very certain, I think is very uncertain. And whether it will be, how long it'll be before we get to recovery and what will normality look, and indeed, what will central government support give us on the way. I think the DCN should be commended for actually getting us a better second tranche of money and support during the crisis. The first tranche was pretty awful for district councils, but the second one was reasonably okay. The government have said that they will support authorities via an income compensation scheme for lost sales fees and charges. But in reality, what does that mean? First of all, the authorities will have to absorb the first 5% loss, and then the loss of the calculated planned income for eligible sales fees and charges income. The government compensating them for 75p in every pound. But the question is, what does eligibility really mean, and what will be eligible and won't be? There won't be any compensation at all for our commercial investments. As Mark said, we won't know exactly what our compensation is till the end of the whole tranche at the end of 31st of March 21, when everything will be reconciled. I will repeat what Mark said because I think it's very important that this council's budget is better placed than most, and this is a result of the strategies used for many years whereby savings are identified in full ahead of the financial year. Mark has said most of the rest. I think we've got to realise going into the new unitary that there are pressures for 21-22, and they could be because of the increase in council tax support caseloads, slowdown in housing growth, reduction in collection rates, and also business rates yield might fall, number of businesses that might fail during 21-22, and the reduction in collection rate. Also, I think we've got to be aware that the impact of the coming to the end of the furlough scheme will have. The housing and revenue account seems to have held up very well, and the only variation, which is 50,000, is not due to lost rents. It's due to the fact that we have more voids than we budgeted for, and that was due to the work taking longer because of social distancing. As reported in the June meeting, we've changed capital program external work to protect our workforce. Just coming on to two good news stories, which will be featured later on this evening. The councillors bid for external funding of £3 million for transformational improvements to the Alfred East Art Gallery, Library and Manor House Museum, codenamed GLAM. And that's going to be reported on later on this evening. And the other thing is the award of contracts for the two new build schemes at Scott Road and Albert Street. And we will be awarding those contracts this evening, but it will have to go to full council to be ratified because of the funding. I think Mark's covered everything else, Chair, so I'm happy to take any questions or go to the recommendation.
Has anybody got any questions?
Councillors Jelly and Deering, Chair.
Councillor Jelly?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. And thank you, Mark and Lloyd, for that. Just thinking about the comment about we won't know the true effect of COVID-19 on our budget till 31st of March. Obviously, in the unitary, with aggregation of the borough and district council budgets coming up, we have to set a budget for the unitary to be in place before then. How is the impact of COVID being factored into our budget month on month so that we have an indication of where we might be when we go into unitary?
Do you want to take that, Mark, or shall I?
Entirely up to you, Lloyd.
What I'd do, Ian, I'd point you at Appendix A, which is modelling what COVID potentially is going to do and the effect of COVID. And short of saying there's a little bit of a finger in the air, I think that gives you the best guess estimates of where we can be.
Mark Deering, Councillor Deering.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I really wanted to just come back to the income compensation scheme for the lost sales fees and charges. In 3.6, I think I understand what's being said here. However, according to table 3, we should get our first tranche of that in September, October this year, and that should be for April to July this year. Yet, as I understand it, no data has been collected. Have we collected data for that? And has that been submitted to the government yet?
If I may, Chair, we're currently in the process of collating that data, and it will be submitted to government at the end of this month with a view that payment will be made in October.
Okay, thank you.
I have no other people wishing
Councillor
to...
Thurland's chair.
Oh, Councillor Thurland.
Sorry, yeah, I didn't put my hand up because I thought it might be answered. Mark, when we're talking about the government sorting out what every council's going to get at the end of this tax year, if you like, is there anything we can do, or have we factored in the fact that this might carry on after? So are they going to pay what councils have spent up until the 31st of March and then start again? Or do you think it might be a rolling programme of getting our payments back?
If I may, Chair, what government have done is provided support in the current financial year. What they haven't done at this stage is said how any future support would take place if this extends into 21-22.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else wishing to ask or make a point? Lloyd, could you take us to the...
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to move the recommendation as per paragraph 13 on page 21 of the report.
Show of hands. 4.
That's unanimous, Chair.
That is unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you. We now come on to item 10, which is Gypsy and Traveller provision. And I believe James Wilson is going to talk to this report.
I am, Chair. Thank you very much. This report is to set out the Council's approach to providing Gypsy and Traveller accommodation within the borough and maintaining a 5-year supply of pitches. Section 2 sets out the Council's obligations in relation to assessing the housing needs of Gypsy and Traveller communities. It's the Gypsy and Traveller Accommodation Assessment, the GTAA, that identifies the needs for pitches, and the Gypsy and Traveller Site Accommodation Policy, which is part of the development plan, which will set out whatever allocations are necessary to meet the needs over the plan period. The new GTAA was published in March 2019 and concluded that 24 pitches were required to 2033 for Gypsy and Traveller households that met the planning definition. A further 24 pitches were identified for households that did not meet the definition. The need for the first 5 years of the plan is 15 pitches. The Gypsy and Traveller Site Allocations Policy is at an early stage of production. This needs to be completed and adopted as soon as possible to enable the council to have a plan-led process for Gypsy and Traveller pitch provision rather than through planning appeals. There has been several unauthorised developments in the borough over recent months, and the report sets out a series of work streams that will be pursued in order to proactively manage the demand for pitches in appropriate locations. So moving on to the next section, Gypsy and Traveller Site Allocations Policy. This is from 2.9 to 2.11. as said about, this says provides more information on the GT site allocations policy. And I'll point you to 2.11. We're hoping that this is likely to be adopted by the new authority early in 2022. And it goes on to say, in the meantime, policy 31 of the North Northants Joint Course Strategy and other policies within the development plan provides sufficient guidance in order that any applications can be adequately and consistently assessed. So then moving on to the next section, the 5-year supply of Gypsy and Traveller pitches is an important component in any determination of planning applications. Previously, the council could not demonstrate a 5-year supply. However, following the publication of the GTAA and an assessment of currently consented and deliverable sites, the council will be arguing at the forthcoming appeal hearings that it does have a 5-year supply. If pitches that are not occupied by Gypsy and Traveller families are taken into account also, then the council would have a much larger supply. So moving on to compulsory purchase order, CPO proposals are set out in a separate report to members in this agenda, and you'll be getting that report after this context report. Suffice to say that it is important that this site comes forward for the purposes it was given permission for. Once purchased, the council can apply for grants from Homes England to go towards infrastructure and access of the site. Then moving on to pitches occupied by non-Gypsy and Travellers. This has been touched on above. Further work is to be carried out by ORS, the consultants who drafted and authored the GTAA, and the Planning Service and Housing Department to understand the status of these families and whether enforcement action or evictions are necessary. This is a major piece of work, but the scale of use of pitches by other non-Gypsy and Traveller families calls into question whether these can be freed up for Gypsy and Traveller families in need. Then moving on to intensification and extensions of existing sites. This is a piece of work, and in considering bringing forward consented sites, the council will also assess whether there is capacity on existing sites to intensify or provide extensions in appropriate locations, which would increase supply. And this would then feed into the Gypsy and Traveller site allocations policy. So coming towards the end, the licensing of Gypsy and Traveller sites, all these are streams of work that need to be going on in parallel with each other. But this is a separate piece of work by Environmental Health team to ensure all sites have the requisite licence to enable residents to access a level of facilities and utilities. This is ongoing work, which helps to maintain the licensing regime on all of these sites. And then finally, Gypsy and Traveller strategy. A Gypsy and Traveller strategy is not a statutory document or a requirement. However, it is a document that would provide a coordinated approach to those issues that the Gypsy and Traveller community face. It is, I can't read my writing. It is sometimes that it is something that the new authority may wish to develop, and initial conversations have been undertaken by officers in this regard. So I then just bring your attention to the recommendations set out in section 7, and they're numbered 1 to 5, Chair. And that's the presentation of the report. Happy to take any questions.
Right, this is a report for all of us. So would anybody like to make comment on this report? David?
Can't see anything, Chair.
Councillor House has indicated he'd like to speak.
Yeah, nothing too excessive, Chair. Just to sort of say how pleased I am that we've got this report in front of us, and you know the work streams that need to be involved to put the plan in place. It's great to hear that we feel we now have from the assessment, the new assessment, we have our 5-year land supply, and we feel we can defend ourselves against appeals. that was it really. It's great to see this come forward, and hopefully these work streams can kick off and we can move forward with the intensifications and all the other things the report covers. Thank you,
David. Has anybody else got anything they would like to say? In that case, the recommendations are at 771. Are you content with that? Can you show by raising your hands? I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much. We now come on to James Wilson's talking to the next report, but he's helped by Lisa Hyde. Land to south east of Stoke Albany Road, Desborough, compulsory purchase order. Over to you, James, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'll defer to my good colleague Lisa and
Got no problem with that. I apologise, Lisa. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to do a short opener and then some more details to follow by Jonathan, who's joined us tonight, our Head of Property Services. Clearly, this report is in the context of what you've already heard from James in terms of our strategy going forward, and we need to make reference to that report. And a number of strategies, but this is one specific around a CPO that we wish to bring to you tonight. Now, what I want to just confirm is that we are just looking for an in-principle decision. A CPO will eventually come to council, but what this report signifies tonight is that we are confirmed that we are serious about making a declaration about going forward on this work. And Jonathan is just going to talk you through the technicalities of that going forward.
Jonathan, you're more than welcome tonight. It's good to see you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll just briefly take you through the report. So that the site is situated on the southeastern side of Stoke Albany Road in Desborough and comprises vacant paddock land of approximately 7 acres as shown in Appendix 1, with the consented traveller pitch area being approximately 3 acres to the northeast of the site. The site has consent for 10 travellers' pitches together with associated buildings, which was granted in 2009 and has been implemented by way of discharge of conditions and small-scale groundworks on the site. But to date, there has been no further development to the site for the consented purpose. Officers have sought to discuss the acquisition of the site with the owner for several years with a view to facilitating the development of the site. And in recent months, we have sought meetings to discuss potential heads of terms for an acquisition by the council. But the owner has not been forthcoming with engagement for such discussions and confirmed on the 4th of August this year that they would not be prepared to enter into negotiations with the council. And given the importance of seeing the site come forward for the consented use, this report seeks an in-principle consent to use of the council's CPO powers to bring about the acquisition and eventual development of the site for a traveller's pitch. So in using those powers, the council is required to satisfy various conditions, which are detailed in section 3.6 of the report. But given the site forms an important part of Kettring's 5-year land supply for gypsy and traveller pitches, that there's been no development of the site since obtaining planning consent, and the absence of engagement from the landowner, officers consider there to be a compelling case in the public interest for progressing the use of the CPO powers. So in terms of next steps, assuming we obtain the in-principle consent tonight, officers would commence land referencing for the site, service of notices on interested parties or our intent to exercise CPO powers, and we start compiling the necessary documentation to commence the CPO process, such as the statements of reasons. And we would also include an appraisal of the likely financial costs and the feasibility of delivering the project, so members are aware of the costs that you'd be signing up to. Once complete, a further report would be brought back for committee's consideration ahead of making the CPO. But it's also vital that during this time, in terms of preparing for the use of the CPO, that we continue to attempt to engage with the landowner over a possible purchase, as a voluntary agreement would be a far more preferable option to the use of the CPO. Therefore, the report recommends that committee approve in principle authority to the use of the council's compulsory purchase order making powers to acquire the land, and that delegated authority is granted to the executive director to begin the preparatory work to utilise the compulsory purchase powers. I'm happy to take any questions on the report, Chair.
Thank you for that. James, have you got anything you want to add at this stage?
I would just say, Chair, that it is very important that the council is seen to be taking action in this regard in relation to our 5-year supply. So, you know, one of the part of the 5-year supply, there are 18 pitches which you know, go to make up the supply or the availability of pitches against the need of 15. But 10 of these are at the site that Jonathan's just been describing. So it's important that we bring these sites forward in terms of delivery and be seen to be able to do that over the next 5 years. Now, the Gypsy and Traveller National Planning Policy Strategy states that, you know, you can, so long as there's planning consent, that can be deemed to be deliverable. But if it goes beyond 5 years in relation to it coming forward, then clearly at some point it would be called into question as to whether or not these could be deemed to be part of the 5-year supply. So it is important to make progress in relation to delivering this site. That's what I'd say, Chair.
Thank you for that, James. I believe that David, yes. David, would you like to lead on the comments, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. All I'd like to say is I understand. We all understand, I think, the importance of seeing this site come forward as part of the delivery mechanism, as James has just outlined. I think I'd just like to say that it's really unfortunate that we aren't at the moment able to engage with the landowners, and they've decided not to continue communication in regards to a mutual beneficial agreement. It would be good to sort of emphasise that at any given opportunity we'll revert to that if we can, because obviously it's in everybody's interests. We do need to remember that they are the landowners are still a partner in other areas within the council's Gypsy and Traveller allocation. So if we can in any way progress those conversations, then that would be, you know, certainly the right option if we can do that. But again, we do need to move forward with this site, and I understand why this report's in front of us, and I understand we need to CPO it if that's the only option available to us. Thank you, Chair.
Wise words, and I do so hope that we can find a way. Has anybody got anything they want to say on this? Before we go to the recommendation, we need to widen number 2 on the recommendations at point 8. Executive Director Lisa Hyde, we need to widen that out to more than just Lisa.
Yes, can I suggest?
Would you mind? Yeah, please.
Also said for any other member of the management team.
Can we so write that into it, or any other member of the management team be written in? Yes. So we now come to, are you content with the recommendation as amended on item 8?
Chair,
Sorry.
Before we go any further, Councillor Jelly dipped out and came back in, so it might be advisable if Councillor Jelly abstained from this one.
Councillor Jelly, I didn't notice that you'd left the room, but I'm sorry, on this occasion, we would not allow you to vote. So of all the other councillors, could you now indicate that you're content with item 8 as amended?
Yeah, that'll be unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. That's unanimous.
My apologies, Chair. My internet dropped out, and I've got BT digging the road up outside my house, so I apologise for that.
There's no need to brag about it. Thank you very much. We now come on to item 12, I believe. James Wilson again, and this is about local cycling and walking infrastructure plans. And I believe
we have a speaker, but we'll take the report first, Chair.
Yes, we'll do the report, but
yeah,
we have a speaker.
We
yes,
do, and they're ready and
okay.
waiting.
Right, so off we go with James.
Okay, thank you again, Chair. So this report is to inform members of the preparation of a local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, as you've said, termed an LC WIP. So if I refer to it as that, you'll know what it is. The scope of the LC WIP and funding contributions towards its preparation. So section 2 sets out the background and rationale for LC WIPs, and this has really come about due to the funding available through the county council. They're unable to project manage and lead this, and what they've been doing is providing technical funds of up to £50,000 to bring forward these plans in other parts of the county. So some already have been delivered and produced, one for Northampton, and now there's an opportunity for Kettering to prepare its own, but we would be leading that. So at 2.3 it says an adopted LC WIP and future investment in local cycling and walking infrastructure and safe routes will help to deliver the council's climate change obligations and commitment to reduce carbon emissions by our proposed target of 2030. It is a very important part of the strategy, I think, in relation to transport and travel around the borough. So the guidance for the LC WIP is sort of national, and it recommends approach to planning networks for walking and cycling that connect people and places, whether those be work, education, shopping, and for other reasons such as leisure. So on page 44, it sets out the process of the LC WIP, which is divided into 6 stages. And so determining the scope of the LC WIP, there's 4 elements: establishing a geographic extent, identifying the best delivery model, deciding governance arrangements, and agreeing timescales. I won't take you through all of this in detail, but for establishing the geographic consent, typically, cycling, you'd look to up to a 10-kilometre radius, and for walking, typically 2 kilometres. And it is recommended to members that the council focuses on the main borough town of Kettering at this stage for the focus of the LC WIP. So identifying the best delivery model, it's proposed that a single local authority model is adopted. Now, although Kettering Borough Council will become part of the new unitary authority, this model should not need to change, as other local areas will be developing their own models and LC WIPs, and actually bringing together transport and those other functions within the new unitary authority should help that process as it goes forward. And then deciding on governance arrangements, well, we will set up have a project manager and set up a small project team within the council, and then we'll be consulting and using other partners such as the Highways England, Network Rail, other environmental and sustainability organisations, and we will be consulting with other partners along the way. So it's proposed that a consultancy is appointed to develop the LC WIP in line with the project team that will be developing it at Kettering Borough Council, overseen by the KBC Planning Policy Team. Agreeing timescales. So basically, the LC WIP should look at a long-term approach, and part and parcel of having this strategy is so that we can be in a position to actually bid for funds and investment and be ready to take advantage of the opportunities that might actually be available to deliver this infrastructure, which is much needed. So it should be over a 10-year period, but we're suggesting that it goes to 2031, which would tie in with the development plan. And then, because it's so important, I think we want to try to have the preparation for this prioritised over the next 12 months. So it would feed into the new authority, but we'd hope to maintain that as a priority within the new authority's work programme. So if I then just take you to the recommendation, Chair, it's that members agree to the preparation of the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan for Kettering, agree the scope for the plan as detailed in paragraphs 2.5 to 2.9, and agree up to £30,000 of funding to be used to appoint consultants to to deliver the project with KBC. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, James. Can we now invite in Councillor Anne Lee? Good evening. Councillor Lee?
Can you hear us, Councillor?
She's muted on my screen.
Can
Thank you.
There we go.
There we are.
Whenever you're ready, Councillor, 3 minutes.
Thank you. I would like to thank the executive and the officers for progressing the agenda of active travel, and thank you for allowing me to speak on this. It's an interesting report. I would just like to just make a few points, if I may, which I hope will feed into your decision making. One, the geographic scope, I would like to see that wider to include the whole borough. And the reason for that is as follows. We are now considering e-scooters, and electric bikes will become big in the next 10 years, which is the time scale we're looking at. So I think that it would be good to extend the scope to include the whole of the borough, not just Kettering. Also because I don't think that otherwise that second plan will ever come about for the rest of the borough, and that would just be an opportunity missed for them. Secondly, I would like for us to get our stakes in the ground with cycling and walking, and especially cycling. And what I mean is, can we please get the secure parking? It's not mentioned here, I believe, and I know we're dealing with that separately. James, you have explained that, but we're looking at a comprehensive active travel policy, and being able to store your bike securely is very important. So it's sort of the timeline on that. We need a greater sense of urgency, in my opinion, on that. Then I would like to ask what the criteria would be for appointing a consultant, because we had a report 10 years ago. We had a consultancy from London who helped us with our transport plan for the roads and the car parks. Pell Frischman from Manchester Square in London. Can I appeal that this time you consider maybe seeking a consultant closer to home, because active travel, I mean, I know I spent several days cycling around the borough to get my opinion in on the legal recent consultation on where cycling can be improved. For someone coming from outside needing to familiarize themselves with the area would waste a lot of the money. And talking about the money, I noticed that you're only proposing to allocate 30,000 of the 50,000 to the consultancy studies. So I think there is some room there to extend that. The timeline seems quite long. I think we need more urgency, as I've already said, sorry. Because in this report, which is very interesting, but you are omitting some parts of decision-making policy. Normally you formulate a policy, you adopt it, you implement it, and then you assess to see how successful it is and where it can be amended. But here it seems to stop at the place where you get, well, before the implementation. So I don't want us to keep talking and start doing things and implementing them in practice, because we really need this. But again, I'm very glad that we are talking about this tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Thank you for your comments. I'm sure that they've been taken note of.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. I'll pop you back in the waiting room.
James, my understanding is this is a plan, this is a beginning, as it were, and the rollout over 10 years or 11 years or whatever. It's a rollout, so the plan will develop as the years go by, presumably.
Yes, I don't think it would be set in stone, Chair. I think it's really important for us to undertake the analysis, prior to, then putting in infrastructure which will hopefully be used. I do take Councillor Lee's point about the scope of the in the geographic scope. However, I think there are opportunities for linking some of the thoughts around, Kettering within that 10-mile radius sort of thing, and then linking to other networks that could link up to other communities. I just think doing it across the borough as a whole would dilute the focus, and the main activities and the main routes that are going to be beneficial, I think, are primarily around Kettering first of all. It's not to say that we couldn't bring forward further plans in future for Desborough and Rothwell and other centres. But it's about setting a framework so that we can be very clear that actually on the evidence, cycle storage, either at the hospital or in a certain part of the town centre is going to be used, and widening the widths of roads is going to enable cyclists to have safe and easy access across the town, and it's where those linkages best work. So the £50,000 from the County Council is just for the technical work, and Kier WSP will be providing that in terms of modelling of cycle flows, or modelling how the highway network can accommodate the infrastructure that we want to put in. The £30,000 is additional to that, which we would be putting in. So it's kind of like match funding, and we would be providing a transport consultant to project manage the project, just because of capacity, but also because of expertise. And I take the point in relation to having somebody closer to home, because I think that would probably be, so if we possibly can, we would shortlist people who could do this from local consultancies or individuals. I think there were several other points that well made by Councillor Lee, and there is an urgency about this work, and we do want to crack on with it. 12 months I think is a reasonable period. Other LC whips have taken between 18 to 24 months, but they were the pioneers in terms of Northamptonshire. I think because they've undertaken the work, we can build on that, and possibly, I'm confident that we probably can do it in 12 months, maybe if not quicker. So leave it there, Chair, unless you've got any further questions.
Anybody got anything they'd like to say or ask?
Councillors Edwards and Jelly, Chair.
Councillor Edwards. Scott.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to say that I really welcome this. It's been part of our climate emergency plan, and walking and cycling has played a big part of that. And if anything good that has come out of this pandemic is the amount of families that I have seen out there walking, cycling, getting out there in the fresh air. And I think that anything we can do to continue that success that we've had and to improve the facilities for them, then it's very much welcomed. It also kind of fits in with the government's plan about reducing obesity and getting people out there to exercise. So yeah, I fully welcome this plan.
Thank you for that, Scott. Councillor Jelly, Ian Jelly.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I agree totally with Councillor Scott. Scott Edwards, I should say. Very supportive of this going forward. It's a step in the right direction. It links in nicely with our climate change strategy and also our health and well-being strategy. It's important that we make sure that people get out there and do the exercise and things like that. So I'm very happy to get involved wherever I can if I can help to drive this forward. So great report, very supportive. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Councillor Thurland, Chair.
Councillor Thurland.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. 3.1, James, because I think this is really cross-party. We've all agreed that this is a really good idea and what we need to see. 3.1 on the consultation, it says concerning engagement is not necessary because it's the scope, but however, engaging with stakeholders and the public will form an important part of the development. Have you got any ideas how you're going to go out for consultation on this to local people? And once we've done that, will it actually come back to exec to agree with how the consultation will take place? Thank you.
So I'm not entirely sure because really Simon Richardson and Planning Policy Team are leading on this, and this is at the initial beginning stages of developing our thoughts on project managing this. It will be overseen by the KBC Transport Strategy Group. So Martin also sits on that group, and the stakeholders involved will enable us hopefully to engage, and we may well bring on board a cycling kind of representative onto that group. So yes, I think we can put out a kind of consultation strategy so that we can ensure that we cover all those key representatives, in the cycling community, but wider than that. I think it will come back to a committee whether or not we bring it back, after we've done consultation. I'm not quite sure how we're going to run this in relation to, do we put forward, sort of some proposals and then go out for consultation and then amend those and then bring it back to committee. Maybe we can work with portfolio holders to identify how best to move that forward.
Yeah, I think that would be better with the portfolio holder of how we go out, because what we don't want is for you to go out to consultation, you come back to a committee and they say, well, you didn't do that very well, it should be this and this. And I think the portfolio holder will have a good input to that. Thank you, James.
Okay.
Any other? No, if nobody else wants to say anything about it, I'll take you to item 7, the recommendation. Are you content with that recommendation?
Yep, that's unanimous.
That's
Chair.
unanimous. Thank you very much, councillors. We now come to county-wide antisocial behaviour policy, and Martin Hammond is going to talk to this report.
Thank you, Chairman. It's now been quite a long time since the strategy was drafted, and the original intention was to take it to in March. And I do know that all our other partners have managed to get it to committee before we did. So this replaces an original ASB strategy from 2015, but it's more than a refresh because the County-wide Community Safety Board has identified ASB as one of its priorities, along with the hate crime strategy that we saw some months ago, nearly a year ago now. And this is one of the things that the Safety Board, Community Safety Board has been focused on. So paragraph 2.3 just identifies the component parts of the strategy, which focus more on intervention, on victim support, and on problem solving than perhaps previous strategies did. The supporting the strategies in the delivery plan. You'll not be surprised to learn that that's progress of that's been impacted by COVID, because the resources that would have been spent time on the delivery plan have been COVID related stuff. So today at the Community Safety Board, we did come back to this, and delivery plan is almost complete. And so we can start to hopefully focus on doing more of the doing than we've been able to do for 6 months. So really, there's the strategy there, which has already been adopted elsewhere in Northampton. Clearly, this will be a strategy that endures to the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards, Scott Edwards, would you like to?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This report highlights the need to have an updated strategy on antisocial behaviour. And I know, like many other councillors, my inbox is full of antisocial behaviour that's happening around their area. And it's good to be able to liaison with people and to update this policy. In line with other countrywide crime strategies, the report looks at early intervention and prevention, victim and witness support, dealing with offenders, community engagement and problem solving, and intelligence gathering and understanding local problems. And it's really that last bit about understanding local problems, because to some residents, some sort of antisocial behaviour can be classed as antisocial behaviour, but to some it can't. We're really fortunate to have Martin Hammond as the chair of the Community Safety Board, who I know has put a lot of work into these reports, and I thank him for that. And I would ask the executive to support this report.
Thank you for that. Has anybody got anything they want to say? Well, the recommendation is at point 7. Do you accept that? Are you content to accept that? I think that's a unanimous, thank you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'd like to add to the fact, thank you, Martin, for the hard work you put in on these things. Never easy. We now come to item 14. Alfred East Art Gallery, Library and Manor House Museum GLAM. And I believe that Rochelle is going to talk to this report. Rochelle.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to update members on the progress with the Capital Transformational Project for GLAM, which refers to, as you've just mentioned, the Alfred East Art Gallery, the library and the Manor House Museum. The borough benefits from having a cluster of heritage assets in the heart of Kettering's town centre, and cultural-led regeneration presents a unique opportunity for Kettering, providing a significant opportunity to support the delivery of our Kettering town centre vision. Together with Northamptonshire County Council and key community stakeholders, we have been developing this project over the last 2 years and completed a feasibility study in 2019. The collective aim of the GLAM is to become a cultural anchor for North Northamptonshire, elevating the facilities to become a visitor destination and a hub for the community, creative startups, as well as help to unlock economic growth and inward investment within the local economy. In July this year, in response to COVID-19, the government announced plans for the Getting Building Fund. Working with SEMLEP and under tight deadlines, GLAM was put forward as part of the regional submission, and the project received wide support from the local Growth Fund board. In August, it was announced that GLAM was one of the successful projects set to receive £3 million. It is because of the council's foresight to not only make plans but also develop the project to feasibility stage that we have been able to respond and secure such investment. The impact and response to COVID-19 has seen Kettering being able to accelerate cultural-led regeneration plans, which, when coupled with the recent success of the High Street Heritage Action Zone, Kettering is set to see over £8 million of investment into the town centre over the coming 4 years, something we anticipate will act as a catalyst for future inward investment and economic growth. The project is now in the final due diligence process. However, we do need to confirm the project financial profile and match funding commitment. We are also working closely with key stakeholders to ensure alignment and integration with the High Street Heritage Action Zone project. Table 1 in 3.6 sets out the anticipated capital funding breakdown, including budgets already existing and the additional financing, which includes a further commitment of £440,000 from this council, as also referenced in 5.2. It is important for members to note that the total investment of £640,000 from Kettering Borough Council and £300,000 from Northamptonshire County Council will leverage a total of over £3.9 million into transforming these cultural facilities. If I may now refer back to the Chair and recommendations set out in section 9. Thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you. I believe, Scott, you are happy to be leading on this.
Me again. Yeah, and I really want to say this is an absolutely fantastic and brilliant news story for the Borough of Kettering. And I really want to pay tribute to Rochelle and her team for putting in the real hard work, in some cases, really, really tight deadlines in submitting all this application and achieving the money that we have achieved. It really does show that behind the scenes, a hard lot of work has paid off, and we prepared ourselves for this. So really, Rochelle, thank you, and please pass on thanks to your team as well. Kettering has a really strong heritage of having culture, and having this investment to increase the amount of culture that we have is really astonishing. You know, we have existing people that use the library, the art gallery and the museum, and this investment will encourage more people to come into the Borough of Kettering and be able to share our heritage on that. So really, I can't praise you enough. Fantastic achievement. Let's go out, let's promote it, let's get more culture within Kettering. Thank you.
So all of us, Scott. Has anybody else got anything they'd like to say about this?
Councillor Deering. Chair.
Councillor Deering.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Edwards and Rochelle. Great to hear this. I'm delighted from my point of view on the regeneration side that, you know, that we're seeing even more investment coming into the Kettering Town Centre, which is going to pull more people in again, given the circumstances that we've had. And will obviously complement the Heritage Action Zone that we've already agreed to as well. So really pleased to hear that and definitely support it all the way. So thank you very much.
I think one of the things that it strikes me, Scott, is the fact that We know that retail is under pressure at the moment, but this is to do with heritage, and it encourages people into the town centre. And I think our managing director once said to me, we just got to give them reasons to come into the town centre. And I think this will definitely do that.
I think you're absolutely right. You know, Russell, I think the town centre is changing, and to encourage more people in to use different sorts of facilities and upgraded facilities, it's only moving us forward and creating a better Kettering.
And with everything else they've had to do over the last few months, they were doing this work. Awesome. Anyway, we have recommendations on item 7 has the recommendations there. Are we going to be content with that? Are we content? Unanimous. Thank you very much. We now come to, I believe, last but not least, item 15. John Conway is going to talk to housing new build programme, appointment of contractors and revised budget forecast for Scott Road and Albert Street, and appointment of contractors for refurbishment projects. So it's a mouthful, isn't it? A lot of work though, John, isn't it?
Certainly is, Chair. Thank you. The report seeks, first of all, looking at the new build projects. The report seeks approval to accept tenders for 2 council housing new build projects at Scott Road and Albert Street in Kettering. The committee is also asked to recommend to full council that the approved budget for both schemes is increased following conclusion of the tender process. First of all, looking at the procurement process we followed for both projects, this was a 2-stage open tender process. The first stage being a pre-qualification questionnaire, which potential contractors were asked to fill in and return to the council, and that enabled us and our consultants to undertake a financial assessment of their capacity and their capabilities in relation to health and safety. Then those contractors that passed that stage were asked to submit tenders, after which they were interviewed in depth about the tenders and about the way they would carry out the projects. So tenders were evaluated on cost and quality, with 60% of the scoring being allocated to quality and 40% to cost. Turning now to the 2 schemes, first of all, Scott Road. The Scott Road development is taking place on a redundant garage site and will provide 22 new affordable rented homes, and these will range in size from 1 bedroom to 4. The results of the tender scoring process can be seen in table 1 of the report. Contractor A was assessed as being financially viable and scored the highest on both cost and quality criteria. It is therefore recommended that contractor A be awarded the contract for the Scott Road scheme. Moving on now to Albert Street. The Albert Street scheme will provide 6 one-bedroom bungalows for affordable rent in the town centre. Again, this development is on a redundant garage site, and once again, a 2-stage open tender process was carried out. The combined results of the tender scoring process can be seen in table 3 in the report, and contractor A was assessed as being financially viable, and they scored the highest on both cost and quality. So it's recommended that contractor A is awarded the contract for constructing the Albert Street scheme. I should advise the committee that the same contractor has been recommended for approval for both projects and will be recommended in respect of another scheme, which will be the subject of a future report to this committee. In the light of this, officers have looked carefully at the contractor's turnover, their financial standing, and has concluded that contractor A does have the financial standing and the capacity to undertake all 3 schemes, should that be the committee's decision. I just want to conclude by looking at the approved budget for those schemes, because this report also seeks approval to increase budget provision. And this is primarily to take account of quotations from statutory undertakers for connections to the sites and to reflect the risk register which has been produced for both schemes. Just want to say a few words about the risk register. We've used this in the case of these two projects, and we will for all new build projects, to identify, manage and quantify the costs of project risks. So whilst not all risks will become reality, the approach we've taken is that until a risk is mitigated or removed, it's prudent to assume that it will happen and have plans in place to manage that risk. And that includes identifying financial provision that might be required if necessary. So taking that approach, the total additional budget which is required to deliver Scott Road is £398,000 and £253,000 in the case of Albert Street. So in the event that contingencies are not required, the resources would then be available for other projects within the HRA capital programme. So this in effect is a precautionary and a prudent measure rather than an indication of actual expenditure. So I'm happy to take questions on this report, Chair.
Thank you for that, John. Another great piece of news. Councillor Mark Rowley.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is really good. Good bit of news for us. It's continuing the commitment we made to build houses for the first time in a generation. Another two of the 4 projects we've got in flight at the moment actually getting to the point where we can start building is great news. Having this contingency pot is good news as well. It's something I've always had in IT projects, so it works really well. I'm really glad we're using that now. And speaking to John, we're really excited about that. So yeah, let's crack on.
Has anybody got
Councillor Thurland, Chair.
Councillor Thurland.
Thank you, John. I am so pleased that Scott Road's coming because I've got involved with Scott Road about 6-7 years ago when we thought travellers were going to end up on it. So I'm really pleased to see this coming. And as the contractor's got all 3 of these and possibly 4, are they going to be worked together, do you know, in conjunction with each other, or are they going to start one and then finish it and then go on to the other? Because I would have thought it was better for them and for us really financially and to work it all in together.
Well, it's tonight you're being asked to approve 2 and there'll be a 3rd one, so there isn't a 4th. But what would happen is if the committee's minded to approve the recommendation, then the consultants would, and Leanne, who's on this call as well, would actually discuss with them their method statements. The practice would be actually to leave it to them to determine how they carry out the work. So it would be basically, they would be looking to minimise their costs and minimise the time that they're in contract. Where a project takes place within an occupied dwelling, we are much more interventionist and clearer about what we require. But in this case, as long as they're able to complete within the project timescales, we would leave that up to them.
Okay, thanks, John.
Anybody else? In that case, I'm going to assume, Mark, Councillor Early, that you're going to propose both of these items. Can I have a seconder for the first, please? That's Scott Edwards. And can I have a seconder for the second? That's Lloyd Bundy. Are you content?
Yeah, that'll be
unanimous. Looks unanimous. Well done, that's unanimous. That concludes the business of the evening. Let me just say thank you very much for coming. Have a safe journey, stay safe. And Kettering's still a fantastic place. Good night all.
Night.